Okay, first time was a charm. And I did not even check my audio settings. So it looks like it's working okay. Let's turn it up a little bit. Let's turn that up a little bit. Okay. So just let me know if there are any issues. I'm gonna go ahead and share this into the group. I started a little bit early today. It gets dark here so fast in Illinois anymore. And I am to the point, I don't know if it's because I'm getting old or what, but I just do not like being out after dark anymore. So I tried to get all of my stuff done before dark hits because I'm just becoming a wimp, I guess. Share that the Gently Led Sisters group. Okay, so don't really have, hello, Mabel. I don't really have much of an outline today, but I wanted to kind of go over a few of my thoughts on the new documentary targeting the IFB, actually. And, they get upset when we say that they broad brushed the whole IFB, and not all of them did it. Some of the girls that were talking pretty much were just specifically talking about the churches where the abuse happened. So I will give them that. But I do think as a whole, the producers wanted to push that a lot of IFB churches as a whole are like this, and that's just not true. I have known many churches that I've gone to my entire life, and my father-in-law's ministry and my husband's ministry have never been marked by a scandal. There's never been abuse that's taken place, but we've always gone above and beyond to make sure that that didn't happen. And so rather than focus on specific thoughts from the documentary, I don't think it was as bad as Happy Shiny People. I will say that. And so instead of focusing on that, I wanted to focus more on just how we as moms can help protect our children, because honestly, there are predators everywhere. And I guess the only thing about the documentary is, I don't understand why documentaries haven't been done about all the predators in public schools. If there are, please point them to me. Because every day I follow different news sites on Twitter, and every day there's a news story about a teacher in a public school that has gone after their students, their 14, 15-year-old students, and that's sexual abuse. So I do want to warn you, there will be trigger warnings. We will be talking a lot about predators, about sexual abuse, different things like that throughout the show. So that is your trigger warning. And hey, Sarah and Lily of the Valley, and then Shara, Raquel, Mabel, nice to see you today. So instead of really focusing so much on the documentary itself, I will say I was very distracted. I was in and out during the whole thing. So while I heard bits and pieces, I didn't hear it as a whole. And it's not my intent. It's horrible what happened. I'm glad that the men were convicted that had done the crimes. I wish that there had never been cover-ups for any of this stuff. The way it happens in our church is if anything is ever found out or comes to light, it is dealt with immediately. There are no cover-ups. There are no shuffling anything around. There are requirements for a bishop, and there are requirements for those on staff at a church. So if things come out that are worthy of someone being kicked out, they're kicked out. There's no exception when it comes to different sexual sins or sexual abuse, which, like I said, the church that I'm from and this church, we've never had to deal with any type of abuse that's happened. Now, I will say maybe for our church here specifically, one of the things is we are family integrated. So when I say family integrated, that means that the children are with us. We eat together. We do Sunday school together. We do church together. There's the mother baby room, nursery, whatever you want to call it. We don't have a rotation of nursery workers or anything like that. The moms are the ones with their kids. So I will say that if you have a family integrated church, that's going to cut down a lot. If you're not running a bus route, I know a lot of the things that have happened in the bigger churches happened because of a bus route or on a bus route or whatever. And I will say too, that even if a church has done its due diligence with background checks and all of that, which when we've had people work in children's ministries before, we've done background checks on them. Maybe they haven't been caught. And so it's not on their background, check. So there can be people with pristine background checks that come in that are still predators. So we just need to be careful about that. So rather than focus so much on my thoughts of the actual documentary, I want to focus on how we as moms can protect our children from this never happening to them. And that could be if they're in sports, if they have to go to a public school, if they have to go to tutoring, whatever they have to do in their life, just being open to the dangers. If they have a phone and they have social media, even now, even more so than in the 90s, so much more now, predators are on the rise because they can get pictures of your child through social media outlets and different things like that. So you have to really be aware and teach your children how to watch out for these things. So anyways, I'm sorry if you've read it. I'm going to go into more depth with these points that I did. I did write a Facebook post about this, and I called it "Let Us Pray, a Charge to All Parents." And there is mentions of child abuse. So just be warned. So anytime a bad person creeps into a group, whether that is a Baptist group, a Catholic group, Lutheran group, or even a teacher in the public school, the entire group as a whole is scrutinized and criticized. And that's why, as independent Baptists, we need to be above reproach in every area of life, walk, talk, and deed. My parents were saved when I was 1 and soon started going to a Baptist church, actually, just down the road. I was raised as a Baptist, and I've also raised my kids as Baptists. And when I say Baptist, from the time I was, I would say about, I believe Salmonac Baptist Temple was considered IFB. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just Baptist. But from as early as I can remember, it's primarily been like an independent Baptist church. I truly believe that the doctrine in the Baptist church is as close biblically as you can get. I am a Christian first and foremost, and I want to say that while I am Baptist, I've been Baptist my whole life. I plan on being Baptist when I die. I'm a Christian first and foremost. I love the Lord. I believe the Bible. I believe in being good and doing good for others. I'm trying my best to raise God-fearing children who put him above all else. So I'm a Christian first, I'm a Baptist second. That being said, Baptists have problems like everyone else. Man is man and sin is sin. I do think, and I'm going to say here, I think the previous generation of Baptists could have definitely done better at calling out sin among their own ranks. We heard this often when I was a young person, a teenager, and I believe it's what they're trying to use to excuse covering up different sin now, is that it would hurt the cause of Christ. No, what hurts the cause of Christ is having an ungodly man in there to begin with. An ungodly man who is a pastor. Just because you're a pastor does not make you a godly man. It does not make you a man of God. As my husband preached a really good message last night called the man of God, kind of covering that. But there are ungodly men who are pastors, and there are pastors who are godly men. Just being a pastor, having the title does not automatically make you a godly man. Having a position in a church does not automatically make you a godly man. So you have to be really careful about that too. We have to do better at this. Our generation has to do better about acknowledging and calling out sin, not being respecter of persons when it comes to this type of thing. Thankfully, I've never been a member of a Baptist church where a scandal has ever occurred. I never have been. Or accusations have even been made. My father-in-law has a perfect track record at his church, and my husband also has had one his entire ministry. This didn't happen by accident, though, and many of the points I'm talking about, we actually learned from my father-in-law. He went above and beyond, making sure that there was never impropriety, there was never even the appearance of impropriety, and my husband and I learned a lot from his approach, and he did that because when he was younger, I believe there had been some scandals that had happened in churches that he had witnessed, like not him personally, but he was, there have been things that had happened. The pastor had fallen into sin, different things like that. And he was like, I don't want that to happen to me or my ministry or my family. His family was his most important ministry, and it showed. So we took some steps to ensure that we stay above reproach and that an accusation wouldn't even have legitimacy to it if it was made. And I'll get into how you say, well, anyone can accuse you. What do you mean by it wouldn't have any legitimacy? Well, one of the things we do is we're just never alone with members of the opposite sex. So if we're never alone, it's going to be kind of hard to even say that something had the chance to happen. We've also taken steps to protect our children because abuse in any form is horrible and can have lasting effects for generations to come. So let us pray. It's Let Us Pray, Prey, is another documentary about abuse. And unfortunately, it focuses on a few IFB churches. I'm not in fellowship with any of the churches highlighted. I just want to say that. And I was disgusted at the abuse that occurred. Abuse that was proven in a court of law. And that holds a lot of weight with me and my husband. If it's been proven, they admitted guilt. They're guilty. As much as people want to focus solely on the IFB, however, I've always been leery of any group or people that I don't personally know. Every day I hear another story of a public school teacher who was sexually abusing a student, a religious leader who was grooming and or abusing a child, a gym teacher who was raping a student, a family member accused of molesting their child. It's horrible, and it's not specific to one group or genre. As such, we need to protect our children like never before. And I am disgusted and appalled that this type of sin was even attached to the Baptist name. Because like I said, in a world where perversion is accepted, embraced, and even celebrated, as Baptists, we preach against pretty much every form of perversion. So for someone that calls themselves a Baptist to then turn around and be abusing the most innocent people there are, children, then I think that is the worst, thing that you can do as a person in a position of trust. And I wholeheartedly agree with Jesus. Luke 17:2, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. And I completely agree with Jesus when he said those words, because the devil knows that if he can get our kids when they're young, he can impact them for the rest of their lives. If he can take their innocence when they're young and turn them against even the things of the Lord, and have them forsake all of that and then just mess with them, give them anxiety for the rest of their lives, give them stress for the rest of their lives, bring these situations in their lives where they're going to have continual flashbacks and be triggered by it. And the ladies that they interviewed were very, very traumatized, even still in their 30s, 40s, talking about something that happened at 10, 11, or 12, because it's such a pivotal time of age for kids. So I wanted to go over just a few points, and this one might not be quite as long as most of mine, but this is just kind of a charge to all parents to just be leery and, don't have your blinders on when it comes to this subject. It's very serious and it's very sobering, but abuse does happen, and you don't want your kids to be one of those that have the unfortunate, what are the words? You don't want one of them to be another victim. You don't want them to be another victim of abuse. And I have 14 things here that I wrote down. So number 1, be careful about sleepovers. We've never been big on sleepovers, especially with people that we don't really even know that well. People, even in a church, can be hiding a lot of secrets and harboring a lot of secrets. People are often quite different behind closed doors than they are in the church house. And I've found that to be true throughout my years of being in ministry. Someone who you thought was just this angel turns out that at home, they're quite a different person. And that can go the same for women or men. So we've never been big on sleepovers with our kids, especially when they can't communicate well. Obviously, if they can't talk and communicate with you, let you know that something happened to them, then no, they're not going to have a sleepover. Sleepovers are few and far between, and we have to be practically blood related for it to happen, or we have to know without a shadow of doubt that that person is legit, that person is a godly person, that person is doing a good job raising their family. So we don't really do sleepovers. We've done sleepovers here. We do one once a year where I'm here the entire time, as well as the kids' moms are here, or other moms, and all the girls are together the whole time. There's no males. Another thing that we don't do, we're very careful about, and you have to be with teenagers in the home. We only how can I phrase this? Okay. So when Abby's boyfriend comes to visit, obviously he has to leave by a certain time, and he doesn't sleep over at the house. And maybe you trust your kid more than I do, but I'm sorry, I'm human and my kid is human, and that's not going on under my roof. Like, they don't need to be under the same roof, especially when they're dating. So what we've always done is Zeke will stay elsewhere. We've had teenage girls that have come, maybe my kids' friends, my girls' friends. So we will have Jason spend the night somewhere else. When Tommy and Jenna were dating, Jenna would not stay under the same roof as Tommy. So we've never allowed even members of the opposite gender that are the same age as my kids. I'm not talking about little kids, okay, or family members or something, but that are the same age as my kids. We don't do this mixed sleepover thing. It's just very, you're opening up the door for temptation there. So I'll just say that. But I know I was blessed and I was protected because, and this is one of the biggest reasons. I know I've told this story before. This is one of the biggest reasons why we don't do sleepovers, because when I was younger, back then, everyone did sleepovers, and we were really close to a family, and we stayed over there probably 2 or 3 times a week. They would stay over at our house, and it would be like days in a row, like 2-3 days in a row. We would stay there, and then they would stay at our house. And, we would be living there. So we would be bathing there and, sleeping there and all the things. Well, come to find out, the dad had been abusing his daughters. And I think of all the nights that I was there and all the things that could have happened because he was abusing every single one of them. I think there was 3. I think of just how I could be carrying scars, and I could be carrying traumatic things that had happened to me, and he could have taken my innocence and my purity. So I really feel like the Lord protected me in that area, but I was very, very blessed. And I think lucky, if you want to call it lucky, he protected me from that. And I really don't know why, because I was in a vulnerable situation, staying days at this house, and come to find out he already is sexually abusing 3 of his stepdaughters. And I think one of them was his real daughter, his biological daughter. So I consider myself very, very fortunate that nothing happened. But that was kind of a wake-up call for me as a mom. I'm like, we did not have a clue. My mom did not have a clue. And he ended up doing prison time. He went to prison for it. His wife and him divorced. He went to prison for it. But I think even after that, my mom got very leery of sleepovers, and for good reason, because that was a close call. So that's all I'll say about sleepovers. But never leave a baby or toddler who can't talk or communicate with someone you don't know well, even if something was to happen. And my heart breaks every time I hear these daycare stories of these infants suffocating or being killed or being abused, shaken baby syndrome. That's terrible. And the most terrible thing is that they don't have a voice. So wait until your child has a voice. Warn them the dangers. And we're going to go into talking to them about these things. You have to talk to them about different situations that could come up, and, teach them that it's acceptable to touch maybe this part of your body, but not, other parts of your body. So there's ways that you can do that with kids, but I would just never leave a baby or toddler who can't talk or communicate with someone you don't know well, because then they don't have a voice. They're not going to be able to tell you. Even if they have evidence of something going on, they're not going to be able to tell you exactly what happened. So number 3, be careful about sending your kids to camps when you don't know the chaperones. I have heard so many stories of abuse at Baptist camps. Not even abuse. I'm sorry, not abuse. I've heard very, very many stories of impropriety, sexual impropriety that happened during teenagers and during other things at camps. So we're incredibly, incredibly picky about this. The camps that we go to, the chaperones, they don't have like paid staff. That's the chaperones. The camps that we go to, we go with them. So we stay in the dorms with them, and they have only girl dorms. They have only boy dorms. And then we're with them the whole time, like during the day at the activities, we're with them. And as far as I know, I'm almost 100% about this. There's never been a whisper of anything and like impropriety that's happened at these camps that we go to. So if I had found out that there was a camp that we attended and they had staff and something inappropriate had happened, I would rethink going to that camp. So, but the camps that we go to, we are the chaperones. So either me or my daughters or, another family member is the chaperone. So I like that setup the best. That tends to be it, because camps can be any time that you have overnighters. So that's why the sleepovers, the camps, there's any time you've got an overnight length of time, it increases the risk of abuse. So be really careful about that. And I think in this documentary, I know one of the girls that it happened to, she was spending nights over at this family's house, like spending the night all the time. That's a big red flag. So number 4, don't allow your kids, and this is kind of what made me think about this, but don't allow your kids to get super attached to another family that isn't your own. Your kids are your kids. You raise them. And here's another thing to watch for. If you see another dad in his 40s and his 50s, and he is just paying a lot of attention to a young girl, that's a huge red flag. Something's off. And I'm not talking about, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. No, I'm talking about he's trying to text her. He's trying to call her. He's trying to get her to spend the night with, maybe his daughter and her are friends. That's what I'm talking about. So it's not normal when an older man is paying so much attention to a younger girl. Something is definitely off, and that's big time red flags. Number 5, trust your guts. Okay. If something seems fishy, it usually is. There's been so many times where I could not put my finger on something, but I told my husband something is off. And don't ever, I want to throw this warning out there. You're not allowed to throw out accusations because you have a gut feeling about someone. Okay. That's wrong. You're not supposed to rail. You're not supposed to slander. You're not supposed to lie about other people. And sometimes you might have thoughts that cross your head that you shouldn't even voice out loud, because it's horrible if this was not true. If you're thinking this guy is a creeper, he seems like a pedophile, you're not allowed to go around telling everyone that. You keep that to yourself. Obviously, if he does something to where he, proves your gut feeling and there's evidence, then you can definitely say something. But don't just throw out accusations. Don't gossip about someone. Don't lie about someone, because these things are very serious. And one thing I think that's happened is we are just required to believe everyone because they say that they have a story. But if it doesn't hold true to the person's character, there's no evidence, there's no, they don't provide anything to back up their claims, then you have to be careful running with that, because this is a person's life. This is a person's testimony. And I know for my husband and I, we have tried to protect our testimony at all costs. We grew up listening to the preachers talk about how priceless your testimony was and how priceless your name and your character are. And so we've gone to great lengths to protect that. So you have to be really, really, really careful. You have to have the goods on someone before you can make an accusation. You really do. So, but trust your gut. You don't have to be close to someone. You don't have to allow your kids to spend the night at someone's house. You don't have to allow your kids to hang out with someone. Only that let them hang out with people that you fully trust. And if you have a bad feeling, you're not entitled to let anyone be around your kids. So, number 6, don't be alone with someone of the opposite gender that isn't your spouse. So this is one of the things that my husband's dad was really, really good at. And another thing that we have really tried to keep first and foremost in our marriage We're just not alone with members of the opposite sex. Don't go out for coffee with them. Don't chat it up on the phone. Don't text them privately. Don't have private conversations. Just don't. And this alone will protect you. It will protect you from ruining your testimony, your marriage, your home, and in some cases, your life. Almost all of the people that I have known, all the women that I have known that have ended up leaving their husbands, cheating, running off with another man, it all started with texting, with them sliding into their DMs. Because, okay, there's different phases to relationships, all right? You get an adrenaline rush when you're in the first part of the relationship. And if you're an adrenaline junkie, that might be really attractive to you. You get an adrenaline rush when you're learning about someone, when you're getting to know them. Everything is fresh and new and everything is interesting. And, you're a little shy and a little bashful, but this person's so interesting. So that's what starts off a relationship, right? Well, then, it's the honeymoon stage and you're like so in love. Well, after the honeymoon stage comes reality. And at the end of the day, it's just another man. At the end of the day, it's just another woman. Us women, we have our issues, and men, they have their issues. And like I've said it before, at the end of the day, it's just another pair of dirty socks. And love gets deeper throughout the years. Young love and the honeymoon stage might be more exciting, but love at my stage that I'm at almost 24 years of marriage, almost, decades of marriage, almost 24 years of marriage, it's much deeper and it's much more peaceful and it's so much better. It's so much better at the stage than like the young, fresh, newlywed. So couples will get into a rut and they'll think, oh, this person's so much better. And this is why I don't like the dating culture either, because it sets you up for this philosophy. They get bored. They're in the boring stage. We know everything we need to know about each other. Nothing is new anymore. Nothing's exciting. And so then someone else catches their eye. And, now it's all fun and exciting again. And this is why I don't like the dating culture, because you date someone and someone prettier comes along or someone more handsome comes along and you dump that person, go after this person, and soon that person gets boring. So you dump them and go on to the next person. And it's just this never ending cycle. So you have to guard your heart and you have to guard your marriage. And for us, my husband does not counsel women alone. If there's a woman he's counseling, I'm right there in the same room. So sorry, ladies, if you want to counsel with my husband, I'm going to have to know all your issues too, because you're not counseling with him alone. He does not go anywhere alone in a vehicle with someone of the opposite sex. If we have to, there's an older lady that sometimes comes that we pick up. So my husband takes one or two of the girls with him. And she's like in her 80s. And you're saying that's so stupid because your husband's not going to cheat on you with an 85-year-old woman. No, but we're not even supposed to have the appearance of doing anything. So he takes the kids with him. If I have, even other kids you have to be careful about. If you're taking other kids home, take a couple of your kids with too. So I could not believe these stories that I heard where this youth pastor, bus director, they were alone in vehicles with young girls. Like, why was that even? I don't understand why a pastor wouldn't have a problem with his youth pastor. Of course, they probably didn't tell him, but he should have set those guidelines. Like, if you're on staff here, you're never alone. Like, they will tell you that at the camp that we go to, even with the chaperones being from the church of the kids that you brought. One of the rules there is that there's never a counselor and a child alone ever. Like, you always have to have 3. So what I'll do is even if it's just me and some of my kids, and obviously with my kids, I'm alone with them. But if it's Evie from church or something, and we're going to camp, I take one of my daughters with me because that's the rule, and it's a good rule to have. So even they've acknowledged that it's not smart for an adult to be alone with a child. You want to avoid the appearance of evil. So, but yeah, that's the biggest thing that we've done in our marriage and in our life. We're not alone with anyone from the opposite sex. Number 7, monitor your kids' phones. This is so important because in the age that we live in, and this documentary was, I mean, these girls were, it was like, I think they're about my age, because I feel like it was back in the early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s when this abuse happened. And they didn't have the cell phones. Now, it's the capability of abuse happening is so much higher when you enter a cell phone into the picture. And you have to warn them of the dangers of private messaging, warn them of the dangers of anonymity on being anonymous online, warn them of the dangers of you don't really know who you're talking to. And, know who they are talking to, limit what social media they have, and warn and talk frequently about the dangers of DMs and not knowing who you're really talking to on the internet. I don't like Snapchat. I don't like that app. So none of my girls have it on down. We allow some social media sites at a certain age, but we don't allow others until they're older. And it's just because, number one, everything you put on the internet is forever. So we've learned from watching other families and young adults who are stupid and they're punks and they run their mouth and it makes them look really bad. And it brings shame on their parents. So we try to use those as teaching examples with our kids. If you're online arguing with pastors, online arguing with other Christians who are godly people, it just makes you look bad. And so we tried using that as teaching examples with our kids. So we wait for some types of social media sites like Facebook until they're older, over adults actually. And Instagram is a little earlier. That seems to be more of the tame. I don't like Snapchat. There's some like Pinterest, you can have that set on private now. But every time we just allowed Allie to get to Pinterest and she's 13. But I told her, I said, I don't want your full name on there. I don't want a picture of you. So she has a picture of one of her chickens. I'm like, and I want you to have a private account and you're not allowed to accept friends unless we know them in real life. And I said, if anyone ever tries private messaging you, first of all, you don't respond. You come tell me exactly or right away when they do that. So we've put guidelines in place with our kids and we've warned them of the dangers of that. And I stay on top of that. I ask frequently about it. So you are your parents' kid. So you are entitled to seeing what's on their phone, who they're talking to. You're entitled to that. So they don't have to keep that from you. Warn your kids often about the dangers of predators. Explain to them in terms that aren't graphic or in detail what grooming could possibly look like. One of the stories from one of the girls in the documentary, she was talking about how she had received a gift from her. I think it was a youth pastor or something, and it was panties. And as a 12-year-old or 13, 14, whatever she was so confused, and rightfully so. And she didn't know what grooming was. She didn't know the word. She didn't know what it meant. And, us as mature adults, we know that that is grooming. Why do we call it grooming? Because he's preparing her. He starts off with little things, touching her shoulder, rubbing her back, telling her she's pretty, giving her gifts. He's getting her used to that attention to where he starts doing little things that become bigger things. And then eventually it's physical abuse. So you can explain to your daughters in detail. And you know what? Most girls at a young age, they can tell you if they're uncomfortable about something. They can't put their finger on it, but they can tell you when something is off. And listen to them when they talk to you about being uncomfortable about a situation, because they teach them to trust their gut too from the time that they're young. Know their friends and know the families they are hanging around. Know where they are. Know who is influencing them. Now, I will say the nice thing about phones and technology is that I have a little app on here called Life 360. And even though these things right here, have the potential to get our kids into trouble, these also can save our kids' lives in many ways. And one of the ways that they can is they have location on them. Okay. So with a Life 360, I can see exactly where my 2 driving kids are all the time. I don't have it on my boy's phone. I mean, they're like almost 20. My oldest is married. My other one is almost 21. So I don't need to know his location. He's a full grown adult. But it's nice even with Abby, Chloe, and I, because we have it on our phones, they can see where I'm at. And I will say, if you have a spouse or you have an older child who just is vehemently opposed to you knowing where they're at, that might be a red flag. Because, yeah, I don't know. I don't care where my kids see that I'm at because I'm not going anywhere where there could be red flags or cause for suspicion. Obviously, there's ways around that. If you have 360 on, if you want to sin, you're going to sin. And it's the same way with teens. If they want to sin, they're going to sin. But if they're bucking at you putting Life 360 on their phone, there might be a reason you might want to explore that a little bit. So I will say that even though, it's going to be easy with the phone, easier for predators to get a hold of your kids, the phone does have some good points to it, like location settings and different things like that. So, but yeah, definitely know where your kids are. Number 10, teach them to set boundaries. If someone touching their shoulder creeps them out, teach them to stand up for themselves. I personally don't like hugs that much. I do with my friends, okay? Because sometimes I see someone I haven't seen in like a year and they're like, oh, should I hug you? But I appreciate that they ask, they ask me, do you want to hug? I like hugging my kids. I like hugging my husband. I like hugging those I have a close relationship with, okay? So, but strangers, men, no, not usually. I will hug those that are very, very close to me, that my heart isn't it with and things like that. But no. So if someone comes in for a hug and I don't want one, I will stop them. I'm bold enough in that area. That's just me. I don't mind. Like, no, thank you. I don't want a hug. But by me doing this, it teaches my kids that their body is their own and they can set boundaries with others. So, hey, Ashley. So if they see me setting boundaries in place with other people, then they're going to be more prone to doing that as well. So me personally, I don't make my kids hug others. I know there's, back in the day, it was like, oh, give Aunt Mary a hug. She's leaving. And if the kid would scream and cry, they'd be like, no, you have to hug Aunt Mary. Well, I offer it, Grandma's leaving. You want to give her a hug? I'll ask Hannah, Grandma's leaving. You want to give her a hug? If she says yes, she can hug her. If she says no, I don't push it because I want her to learn from an early age that if she does not want to physically touch someone else, she doesn't need to. Okay. And that's not going to be expected of her. And then that way, when she's a teenager, when she's a young adult, if someone tries to take liberties with her, she's going to know, I don't like this. I said no, he's crossing a line. So make sure you teach your kids early that they can set boundaries with others, especially with physical affection. If they don't want to give grandpa a kiss on the cheek, don't make them give grandpa a kiss on the cheek. It's just as, they don't have to. Grandpa is not owed a kiss from them. Anyone out of my intimate circle of friends is not owed a hug from me. Okay. Hugs are super special to me. Okay. So I'm going to reserve them for special people. And that's my right to do that. If you are a hugger, then go for it. If you don't mind physical affection and all that, go for it, but respect other people if they are not into that. So, and that's something that you can teach your kids from an early age. Yeah. So I'm not one of these that I'm going to discipline my kids because they didn't hug grandma. That's ridiculous. And then you're teaching them that even if they feel weird about it or they feel uncomfortable, they just need to ignore those feelings and just give grandma a hug because they're being made to do it because this is what's required of them. No, when it comes to physical affection, I do not push it. So that's how I handle it with my kids. Maybe it's because I am the way I am about physical affection, but then ask my husband. I'm always asking him for a hug. So I like hugs from certain people. But to me, it's a very more intimate thing. So having anyone in my bubble is very intimate to me. So if I've given you a hug, you're very special to me. Let's just say that. Listen to your kids if a situation they are uncomfortable with arises. And I've seen this so many times. A kid will finally work up the courage, because it's hard when you've been taught that, adults are always right. And we were talking about this, they said adults are always right, and they're right even when they're wrong. Well, when we were watching that part, we had one of my friends was sitting there who was in a public school, and she said she was taught that in the public school too, that an adult is always right even when they're wrong. So this is not just relative to IFB. This is not just specific to IFB. She was taught that in the public school. So when you're taught that and you're coming out saying this person did this to me, or this person makes me feel uncomfortable, it's very, very hard for you as a kid to speak out against authority. So if your kid comes to you and they're telling you, so-and-so makes me very uncomfortable, so-and-so did this, listen to that. Don't overlook their concerns. If anything has happened, do something about it. Go to the proper authorities. If they have been touched in any way, abused in any way, contact the police. And I know for my husband and I, we are mandated reporters. So if anyone comes to us about a situation that has happened, then we feel like we, even conscious, for our conscious sake, we will report it. My son, a situation happened where he was told something, and it was underage stuff that had happened. And because we knew about it, my husband went to the police about them. He went to the police about what had happened. And I think they did end up looking into it. I don't know. They're becoming so like light with child abusers that they barely do anything. But he did go to them and tell them what he had found out about a situation. So we will go to the police if there is abuse of any kind happening. But listen to your kids. So many parents are just like, oh, that wouldn't have happened. I know this person. They would never do that. People do some really bad things sometimes. So if your kid does not have a record of lying and is truthful and honest, why would you not listen to them when they come to you? So definitely listen to your kids when they come to you about situations. Ditch the government and private schools and homeschool your kids. Be in the home with them. So I am with my kids almost 24 hours a day. Even if I'm not with them in the same room, I am with them in the home because they are doing school. I am teaching. I am there if an emergency arises. I am there if they need me, whatever. I've had to break up fights during lessons. I mean, who knows? I'm there. Okay. Because of this, I know what's going on. So I know who they are around. I know what they are being subjected to. This lowers the chance of abuse to almost zero. I will not say that it's impossible, but almost zero. Say what you want, but private and public schools have predators. The best choice for my husband and I was that I homeschool our kids. If you do have to send them somewhere, I would get to know their teacher very well. So there are some moms that are put in the position where if they're a widow or they fall in horrible circumstances where their husband gets fired, they have to go to work and they have to send their kids to school. Get to know their teacher very well. And once again, trust your gut when it comes to these things. Inquire about their day. Know who their friends are at school. Know who they're talking about. Look at their phones if you have to. Just be very involved. I feel like so many parents, their kids are just a bother to them. So they send them to school and they don't have to worry about them and they're just a bother. And if they come to them, they're like, oh, just get away. I don't want to deal with this right now. We're our kids' main protectors. We are, especially as moms, we're our kids' main protectors. So we need to take that job really, really seriously. Pray for the Holy Spirit to show you anything that might be going on. We underestimate the power of prayer. We underestimate the power of prayer, I think, a lot as Christians. And there's so much power in prayer. There's so much power in the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And that's why when I say trust your gut, that's really trust the Holy Spirit, trust the guidance of the Holy Spirit. He will show you things. He will tell you things. There have been times where I feel the tugging of the Holy Spirit, and I feel like he's tried to make me aware of different situations, maybe something that's going on in my kid's life. I can't put my finger on it, but he tells me something's going on. You need to get to the heart of this matter. And after a little digging, I find out. And as moms, we just have to be on the offensive and defensive all the time. So we have to constantly be praying that the Holy Spirit will show us if there's a problem, if there's something going on in our kid's life that needs to be addressed, if there's some hidden sin. Pray for him to illuminate that and to make it, come to light. So Annie said, I look back at situations when I was a teen and I can't believe how naive my parents were. I know. Same with me. And I feel like with me, it was because my parents were saved out of the world. So when they came into Baptist world or Christianity and other people were claiming to be Christians, they just took them at their word. And they knew the world was awful. My mom had suffered some things, growing up. They knew the world was awful, but they didn't think that would be in the church. They didn't think that would be in the Baptist world. And unfortunately, church attracts the very best and it attracts the very worst. And because you have so much innocence and you have so many children in a church setting, there will be bad people that come into that and they will be preying on your children. And I will say too, don't think there's a bad man behind every person that comes in. We need to be careful about reprobating people too quick. We need to be careful about just thinking everyone's evil and everyone's bad. Oftentimes, how someone judges others is how they are in their heart. So if you come across a guy who's just like, everyone's a reprobate and everyone's unsaved and everyone's evil and everyone's wicked, you might want to pay attention to that guy a little bit carefully because he's kind of projecting what's in his own heart. So I'm not saying to like reprobate everyone and, just think that everyone's evil, but just be aware that there can be bad people in any setting and protect your children. That's all I'm saying. So she said she used to take guitar lessons in the church basement alone with a man. It's not good. And my youth leader would drop us off at home after meetings and I was the last house. So we would sit and talk in my driveway. That's not good. A 13-year-old and 26-year-old. That's not good. I'm lucky nothing ever happened, but I did feel uncomfortable. Well, you were right to feel uncomfortable because that should not have even happened. That situation shouldn't have even happened to you to put you in a place where you felt uncomfortable like that. My parents were very naive and never had conversations with us about grooming. And mine did not either. And that's why I'm very, very careful about explaining these things to my children. One thing that happened when I was younger, there was a lot of situations, and I think this is kind of what formed my opinion. And I'm telling you, the Lord protected me. He really did. I used to babysit all the time for other people and their kids. And the husband would often pick me up by himself in the car. And I've always been an extrovert and I've always been uncomfortable with silence. So even as this was before I could drive, before I had my own vehicle. So I started babysitting at 12. So I would have been 13, 14, 15 during the times that this happened. And I would feel so awkward because here I am, this 13, 14, 15-year-old, and this, man in his 20s or man in his 30s is picking me up. We'd have a 15-minute drive or whatever. And I would just try to make conversation. But sometimes it would just get so awkward when I would have like an introverted married man pick me up, where I would just sit and look out the window, but it was so awkward and I hated it. I always liked it and they didn't always do this, when they would send a couple kids, because I was able to talk to kids really easily. I still am able to talk to kids really easily. So then I would just chat it up with the kids and it wasn't awkward at all. So, but now looking back, that was so dumb. Like that was so dumb. If it would have been a bad guy, he could have done the same thing, like groomed and talked and did inappropriate things and all that. So yeah, there was a lot of instances in my life where potentially bad things could have happened, but thankfully they did not. So it just made me very aware of what could happen with my own kids though. So I tried to take guidelines that doesn't. How would you start teaching little kids about this? Mine are 2 and 4, and I know they don't understand a lot of things, but how do you start? Okay, at their age, I do teach my 4-year-old and 3-year-old about this. So what we do is after a bath, usually we'll be in the bath or they'll be in the bath, and I'll be like, who made you? And they'll say, God. I'll say, yes, God made you so special. And you know that God made you with your own body, and you have your own eyes and your own hands, and you have your own legs, and you have all these body parts that God made you. And then I'll say, now those are yours and yours alone. They belong to you. God gave them to you. He didn't give them to anyone else. So I'll say, is it okay if someone touches your nose? And you make it into a little game, and they'll be like, yes, laughing. Hee hee hee. Is it okay if someone touches your hand? Yes, hee hee hee. Is it okay if someone touches your hair? Yes. And then I'll get more specific and I'll just point, is it okay? And I'll touch to one of the more private areas. Is anyone ever supposed to touch you there? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, no. And what happens if someone tries touching you there? And then they're supposed to say, scream, yell, kick, come find mommy and tell her, come find daddy and tell her, because I'm not far from my 4 and 3-year-old ever. Like I'm not, or their siblings are not far from them. So that is what I do. And I've done it since the time that they were young, because I want them to know that there are certain things that are hands off. No one is allowed to touch them there. And then the whole thing with the hugs. I don't push physical affection. I don't push hugs with my kids. I don't force my kids to kiss grandpa goodbye. I don't force my kids to hug grandma goodbye. There's different schools of thought about that, but when it comes to things like that, I'm not going to force that. That's my personal opinion about that. I don't think it's a sign of disrespect. I think from the time that they're young, I think they need to be comfortable with physical touch and physical affection. And if they don't want to hug someone, then they don't want to hug someone. I'm not going to force that. So now there's a difference in that and acknowledging someone. Sometimes my kids can get a little spiteful or spunky and they don't even want to look at someone or answer back. There's nothing going to happen with words as far as, teaching them respect. So yes, I will. If Miss Susie comes in and says, hi, Hannah, how you doing? I'm not going to let Hannah just ignore her and run off. No, I'm going to say, Hannah, you need to say hi to Miss Susie and say, hi, Miss Susie, how are you? You need to respond. There's a difference with that than physical touch. So I draw the line at physical touch when it comes to that. So that's what I do with my kids. We kind of make it into little games, make it age appropriate. As they get older and they're nearing puberty, then we deepen the talks into, this is what's going to happen every month. And there are bad men out there that, want to take advantage of purity and innocence. And, this is why you are not alone. When you're dating, you're not alone with a member of the opposite sex. We don't have like a youth pastor or anything. So we don't really do any type of activities like that. But even when my husband was a youth pastor, he was never alone with a teen girl, ever. Not one time. Never took any teen girls home by himself. I was with him. His sisters were with him. Another person was with him. He was never alone, ever. I don't think there's one time in his whole ministry when he's been alone in a vehicle, especially with, a younger girl, teen girl, even another woman. So we've always had. What about when strangers talk to you? Some people are nice, but if they focus more on my kids, I get a little uncomfortable. Just go with your gut there. I was watching something where I guess some people are getting so like bold, they'll take video and stuff of your kids. Now that's weird. I would not allow that. If they want a picture or video of my kids, that's creepy and weird. And no, I would just go by your gut. You can be respectful, but you don't have to like stop and chat it up with them. You can move on quickly. Okay, thank you. We're going to go now. You can kind of move the conversation on quickly. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would just find a way to end the conversation, especially if they're making you uncomfortable. Never give personal details, where you live, your kids' names, different things like that. So sometimes kids just, draw a lot of attention. So We as parents have to be hyper vigilant in today's day and age. With kids having access to the internet, the number of predators does climb by the day. We have to be aware of what's out there, and so do they. We have to guard their hearts, their innocence, and their minds. And I want to say too that sometimes we can do all the right things. We can be vigilant. We can know what's going on. We can do our very best, and a bad person still manages to do bad things. If that happens, you or your child are not broken. God can heal, and you can have a beautiful life. And you can help others too who have been through that, who have been through those traumatic experiences. You can use your voice to help them. So you are not broken. You are not useless. God can still use you in a mighty, mighty way. Bad people have always existed, and unfortunately, they will use positions of trust to hold a power over their innocent victims. My heart breaks anytime I hear of abuse, but especially when it happened at a church or the home of someone who was a professing Christian. May it not ever be so in my home, my church, or my life. And Ashley, that would be cause I would not be happy about that. She said a stranger walked up and kissed her daughter in Costco. It happened so fast and creeped her out. That is really disturbing. I would have had words. I would have said, excuse me, sir, you are not allowed to touch my children, especially without permission. And you are especially not allowed to kiss them. Who are you? I would have definitely had words. That's never happened to me. Oh my goodness. You have the weirdest things happen to you. That's crazy. But yeah, Jesus felt very strongly about those who abuse children. And I agree with what he said in Luke 17:2. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. And unfortunately, we do live in a day and an age where just because someone calls himself a pastor, it doesn't mean that they're a godly man, or it doesn't even mean that they're a man of God. Just because someone, says that they're a godly woman doesn't make them so. Then you go by what their fruit is, what their life is showing. You don't have to trust your kids with them. You don't have to follow their advice if it's bad advice. You're allowed to use discernment. So as moms, let's try using discernment. Let's try trusting our gut. Let's keep up with what our kids are doing, who they're friends with, what's being talked about in these chats, what's being talked about in, Telegram groups, WhatsApp. I don't even use WhatsApp anymore. Telegram groups. What do they have? I don't know. You can make a group chat out of anything. Like anything, any type of social media, you can make a group chat. You can do DMs on Instagram, on Pinterest, on Facebook, I don't think you can Be Real, actually. But you can pretty much get away with stuff if you want to get away with it. So, and I know teenagers have a way of trying to be sneaky, but warn them early of these things. Warn them early of these things and what could possibly happen. So, unfortunately, there's been a lot of innocence taken away from our kids, and we need to try to preserve it at all costs. So I hope that this has helped. If you are in a situation where there is any type of abuse going on, please get help. Talk to someone, talk to a trusted individual in your life. Talk to a trusted pastor, talk to someone that can take measures to maybe report it to the authorities if need be. So please reach out for help. So I will end with that. I hope you all have a lovely week. Sorry for the heavy topic on this Monday, but it's been on my heart since I watched the documentary a week ago. And I'm just disgusted and ashamed that this happened under the Baptist name. And I do want to say that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of Baptist churches. And the situations that have happened, abuse situations that have happened, are very, very few and far between. I've known most of the Baptist churches I've known have been wonderful, and no abuse or scandal has ever happened there. But bad men will creep into any denomination. Bad men will creep into any arena where that there can be innocence. Kids, public schools, anywhere that there's innocence, bad men will be. So, and bad women, man. These public school female teachers that are like sleeping with their students is ridiculous. Almost every week I'm hearing of a new one. our world is becoming worse and worse. So let's be vigilant. Let's love our families, love our husbands, love our kids, and love the Lord first and foremost, and love him well. So I hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next week.